Hey, put that back! A security guard's voice thundered across the VIP parking lot. Bright streetlights and the cold glare of luxury car headlights illuminated the scene. Daniel Hayes stood frozen, holding a designer leather wallet he had just retrieved from the asphalt. Beside him stood his 8-year-old daughter clutching his hand. At that exact moment, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up. Billionaire Olivia Carter stepped out. She looked at Daniel, then she looked at the expensive wallet in his hand. But what Daniel did next made the entire crowd fall into a haunting silence. Daniel Hayes was 36 years old, but his hands told a story of a much harder life. They were calloused, scarred, and permanently stained with the faint metallic scent of copper and industrial oil. Daniel was a master maintenance technician, the kind of man who understood the skeletal structure of the city. He spent his nights in the dark, humming basements of massive office skyscrapers, fixing the invisible systems that kept the corporate world breathing. He was the man people only noticed when the lights went out or the air stopped flowing. Otherwise, he was a shadow in a blue jumpsuit. But to his daughter Emma, Daniel was the greatest man alive. Ever since Daniel's wife had passed away 3 years ago after a long and exhausting battle with illness, it had just been the two of them. Daniel had stepped into the role of both parents with a quiet, unyielding strength that most men would find impossible. He worked the graveyard shifts so he could be home to walk Emma to school and cook her breakfast. He took the extra weekend calls so she could have new books in a safe home, even if it meant he only slept 4 hours a day. They lived in a small, cramped apartment on the edge of the industrial district. It was a space filled with blueprints, old clocks, and the constant, cheerful sound of Emma's laughter. Daniel taught her that while they didn't have much money, they had something far more valuable: their integrity. He often sat her down at the kitchen table and said, "Emma, in this world, people will judge you by your shoes or your car. But the only thing that truly belongs to you is your character. Doing the right thing matters, especially when nobody is watching to give you a reward." Emma was a bright child with a heart of gold. She saw the long hours her father worked. She saw the grease under his fingernails that never quite went away. One morning before school, she handed him a small, handcrafted gift. It was a tiny, yellow star-shaped keychain she had made from plastic beads. "It's for luck, Daddy," she whispered, "so you always remember that you are the best man in the whole world." Daniel clipped it to his heavy industrial keyring. The little star was a bright splash of color against the cold, hard steel of his tools. It was his North Star, a reminder of why he worked so hard in the dark. While Daniel's world was one of wrenches and wires, Olivia Carter lived in a world of glass and gold. At 36, she was the CEO of Carter Industries. She was a woman of iron discipline, often described in business magazines as the Ice Queen. She lived in a penthouse that touched the clouds and viewed the city as a chessboard. On this particular evening, Olivia was attending a high-stakes business gala at a luxury hotel downtown. The event was a gathering of the global elite, a place where multi-million-dollar deals were signed over crystal glasses of champagne. Outside the hotel, the VIP parking lot was a fortress of luxury cars, guarded by a small army of security personnel. Daniel had been called to the hotel that evening for an emergency. A secondary electrical transformer had failed near the lobby, and the hotel couldn't risk the gala losing power. Since it was his night with Emma and he couldn't afford a sitter, he brought her along. He let her sit quietly in the technician's lounge with her homework while he worked on the buzzing machinery. As they finished the job around 11 p.m., Daniel and Emma walked toward their old, dented pickup truck parked near the edge of the VIP section. The night air was cool and the city lights felt distant. Daniel adjusted his tool belt, the little yellow star bouncing against his thigh. He didn't know that in a few minutes he would be standing in the center of a storm. He didn't know that a small piece of leather on the ground would test every value he had ever taught his daughter. Daniel Hayes was just a father trying to get home, but fate had other plans for him tonight. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The wind whipped across the open asphalt as Daniel and Emma walked toward their truck. The heavy ring of keys jingled at Daniel's hip. Suddenly, Daniel stopped. Something was caught in the glare of a nearby street lamp. It was a small, sleek object lying right on the edge of a VIP parking space. Daniel leaned down, squinting his eyes against the bright lights. It was a wallet, but not just any wallet. It was made of fine my midnight blue leather with a gold emblem on the corner. Even without opening it, Daniel knew it belonged to someone who had never known the feeling of an empty bank account. He picked it up, intending to find a security guard to turn it in. But before he could take a single step, a harsh, aggressive voice sliced through the night air. "Hey, put that back right now!" A security guard, dressed in a sharp black suit with a tactical earpiece, was sprinting toward them. His hand was hovering near his belt, his face twisted in suspicion. He looked at Daniel's worn work boots and his faded, grease-stained jacket. He looked at Emma's confused, frightened face. To the guard, Daniel didn't look like an honest citizen. He looked like a thief who had just been caught in the act. "I was just picking it up to return it," Daniel started to explain, his voice calm but firm. "Save it!" the guard snapped, stepping into Daniel's personal space. "I saw you hovering. Give it here or I'm calling the police. People like you shouldn't even be in this area." A few other drivers and valet staff turned their heads to watch the drama. They whispered to each other, their eyes filled with judgment. In their world, a man in a maintenance uniform holding a designer wallet could only mean one thing. Emma gripped her father's hand, her small fingers trembling. She didn't understand why the man was yelling at her hero. She looked at the wallet, then at her father, her eyes filling with tears. Daniel didn't move. He held the wallet tightly, not out of greed, but because he didn't trust the guard's aggressive attitude. The tension was thick, almost suffocating under the yellow glow of the parking lot lights. Just as the guard reached out to snatch the wallet, a low, powerful hum vibrated through the air. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled slowly into the VIP lane, its polished paint reflecting the amber lights like a mirror. The car came to a smooth stop, and the door was opened by a uniformed chauffeur. Olivia Carter stepped out. She was dressed in a stunning evening gown that probably cost more than Daniel's truck. Her presence commanded the attention of everyone in the lot. She looked at the security guard. Then she looked at Daniel. Her eyes moved down to the blue leather wallet in his hand. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of professional coldness. She walked closer, her heels clicking rhythmically on the asphalt. The crowd went silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city traffic. "Is there a problem here?" Olivia asked. Her voice was like silk, but it carried a weight that no one dared to challenge. "Ma'am, I caught this man trying to take your property," the guard blurted out, pointing an accusing finger at Daniel. He was just about to run off with it into the shadows. Olivia looked at Daniel's eyes. She didn't see the fear she expected. She didn't see the guilt of a thief who had been cornered. She saw a man who looked tired but resolute. She saw the small child standing by his side, looking up at him with absolute, unwavering trust. Daniel stepped forward, ignoring the guard's threatening glare. He held out the wallet in his open palm. "I believe this belongs to you, ma'am. It was lying near the planter, where it must have fallen when you arrived." The guard reached out to grab it, but Olivia raised a hand, stopping him in his tracks. She took the wallet from Daniel herself. She didn't open it to check the push or the credit cards. Instead, she looked at the man who had found it. For a long moment, the billionaire and the maintenance man stood in total silence. Two people from completely different worlds, separated by millions of dollars. But they were connected by a single act of honesty in the middle of a cold parking lot. Daniel stood his ground, not asking for a reward, not asking for praise. He was just a father showing his daughter what it meant to be a man of honor. The Ice Queen's gaze began to soften, just a fraction. If you were Daniel in that moment, what would you do? Comment, "Right if you would return the wallet." Olivia Carter gripped the blue leather of the wallet. The security guard was still muttering about proper procedures and calling the police, but Olivia wasn't listening to him. She was watching Daniel Hayes. As Daniel reached down to adjust his daughter's jacket, his heavy ring of keys slipped from his belt. They hit the asphalt with a sharp, metallic clang. The little yellow star keychain, the one Emma had made, bounced away, sliding across the dark pavement. Emma immediately let go of her father's hand and scrambled to pick it up. She cradled the little plastic star in her palms as if it were a diamond. She walked back and handed it to Daniel with a serious face. "Here, Daddy, don't lose your luck." Olivia watched the interaction with a curious intensity. She saw the way Daniel looked at his daughter with a tenderness and a fierce protectiveness that money could never buy. She saw the star. She saw the soul of a man who was teaching his child how to be a person of character in a world that often forgot what that meant. Daniel turned back to Olivia, ready to walk away. Ma'am, but yet his voice dropping an octave. I apologize for the confusion. But before you go, something almost fell out when I picked it up. I tucked it back in, but you should check it. Daniel reached into the side pocket of the wallet, a small, hidden compartment that was slightly unzipped. He pointed to a small, frayed object tucked inside. It wasn't a $100 bill. It wasn't a black titanium credit card. It was a small, yellowed photograph. The edges were curled, and the image was fading from years of being touched, but the face in the picture was clear. It was a woman in her 30s, smiling gently at the camera. She had the same sharp, intelligent eyes as Olivia. Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the photo. Her eyes welled with tears, a sight that shocked the security guard and the valet staff. This was a photo of her mother. It was the only photo she had from before her mother had become ill and passed away. It was a one-of-a-kind memory that Olivia carried with her every single day. You could have taken anything from this wallet, Olivia whispered, her voice cracking for the first time in years. There is enough cash in here to pay your rent for a year. There are cards with no limits. Why did you make sure I got the photo back? Daniel looked at Emma, then back at the billionaire. Because I know what it's like to lose someone you love, he said quietly. Money can be replaced, ma'am. I fix things for a living, and I know that most things can be swapped out for new parts. But memories can't. I wouldn't want my daughter to lose the only thing she has left of her mother. I assumed you felt the same way. The silence that followed was different now. It wasn't the silence of suspicion or judgment. It was the silence of deep, profound respect. The security guard looked at his feet, his face burning with shame. The valet staff stopped whispering and stood in a rare moment of reflection. Olivia looked at the photo, then tucked it carefully back into its hidden pocket. That picture means more to me than everything else in this wallet combined, she said. She looked at the old, dented pickup truck parked a few rows over. She looked at Daniel's faded jumpsuit. What is your name? She asked. Daniel Hayes, I replied. And what do you do for a living, Mr. Hayes? I'm a systems technician, Daniel said simply. I fix things that are broken. Olivia nodded slowly, her mind working faster than the high-frequency trades her company made. She reached into her wallet and pulled out a sleek, embossed business card. It was her personal line, a number only a few people in the world possessed. She handed it to Daniel. Mr. Hayes, the world is full of people who take. It is very rare to find a man who gives. Please let me buy you and your daughter a drink in the lobby before you head home. I would like to hear more about what you fix. Daniel hesitated, looking at Emma. She was tired, her eyes drooping, but she nodded eagerly. Daniel looked back at Olivia and smiled. We'd like that, ma'am. As they walked back toward the grand entrance of the hotel, leaving the security guard and the luxury cars behind, Daniel didn't know that his act of honesty was about to be rewarded in a way he could never have imagined. He thought he was just returning a wallet. He didn't realize he was opening a door to a new future for him and Emma. In the grand lobby under the massive chandeliers, the billionaire and the maintenance man sat together. Two souls connected by a faded photograph and a plastic yellow star. Do you think Olivia will remember Daniel after tonight? Tell us in the comments. 2 weeks had passed since the night in the parking lot. Life for Daniel had returned to its usual rhythm of long shifts and school runs. He had kept Olivia's business card in his wallet, but he hadn't called. He didn't want a handout or a reward for just being a decent human. He had returned the wallet because it was the right thing to do, not because he was looking for a payout. Meanwhile, Carter Industries was facing a technical nightmare. Their latest project, a revolutionary global satellite communications grid, was falling apart at the seams. The system was plagued by a mysterious technical glitch that caused the servers to overheat and shut down every 6 hours. The company's top engineers, men with PhDs from the world's best universities, were working around the clock. They had spent millions on diagnostic software, but they couldn't find the source of the failure. Olivia Carter was under immense pressure from the board of directors. If the system didn't go live by the end of the month, the company stood to lose billions of dollars. One night, the crisis reached a breaking point. The main server farm at the Carter Industries headquarters suffered a total power collapse. Olivia was in the control room, her face pale as she watched the screens go dark. As she stormed out of the room to find her head of security, she saw a man standing in the hallway. He was wearing a gray technician's jumpsuit, his back to her as he worked on an open high-voltage electrical panel. She stopped. Something about the way he worked, steady, focused, and calm in the middle of a blackout, looked familiar. She saw a heavy ring of keys hanging from his belt, and there, dangling from the keys, was a small, faded yellow star. "Mr. Hayes?" Olivia asked, her voice filled with a mixture of shock and relief. Daniel turned around, a wire stripper in his hand. He wiped a smudge of grease from his forehead and smiled. "Good evening, Miss Carter. I didn't know you'd be here this late." "I own the building, Daniel," she said with a tired, genuine laugh. "But we're having a bit of a crisis. My engineers are stumped. The power keeps failing and we don't know why." Olivia looked at Daniel's hands. Then she looked at her darkened control room. She had an instinct. She had seen how this man looked at a complex problem in the parking lot. She had seen his integrity. Now she wanted to see his skill. "Daniel, my team has been working on this for 3 weeks," she said. "Would you be willing to take a look? Just fresh eyes from someone who knows how to fix things." Daniel shrugged. "I'm already here. Might as well see what's humming in the walls." Daniel walked into the server room. He didn't look at the computer monitors or the complex code. Instead, he walked toward the back of the room where the massive cooling units and power transformers were located. He knelt on the floor, putting his ear to a heavy metal conduit. He stayed there for a long time, listening to the vibration. He touched the pipes with his bare hands. After 10 minutes, he stood up and pointed to a secondary power junction tucked behind a cooling rack. "There's your ghost," Daniel said. "Your backup power configuration is misaligned. When the main load hits 80%, the backup tries to kick in, but the phase is off. It's off by a fraction of a second. It's creating a feedback loop that fries the capacitors. Your software thinks it's a hack, but it's just a bad wire and a lazy setup in the physical grid." Olivia's lead engineer, a man in a lab coat, stepped forward with a sneer. "That's impossible. We've checked the power distribution 10 times. Daniel didn't argue. He pulled a small multimeter from his belt and connected it to the junction. The screen flared red. "The phase is oscillating at 62 hertz, Daniel said calmly. "It's fighting the main grid." The lead engineer went silent. He looked at the reading, then at Daniel. How did you find that so fast?" Daniel adjusted his keys, the yellow star catching the light. "I spent 6 years maintaining communication systems for the military in the middle of a desert," he said. "When you only have 10 minutes to get a signal out before the enemy finds your position, you learn to find the ghost pretty quickly." Within an hour, Daniel had reconfigured the junction. The hum of the room changed. It became a steady, healthy purr. The screens flashed to life. The temperature began to drop. The system was stable. Olivia watched Daniel as he packed his tools. She realized that she wasn't just looking at a maintenance man. She was looking at a world-class talent that had been hidden in the shadows of the city's utility rooms for far too long. Would you trust Daniel with a job at Carter Industries? Comment yes or no. The next morning, Daniel was at home making pancakes for Emma before the school bus arrived. There was a sudden, firm knock at the door. When he opened it, he found Olivia Carter standing there. She wasn't in a gala dress or a power suit. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater. "Ms. Carter?" Daniel asked, surprised. "I told you to call me Olivia," she said with a warm smile. She looked at Emma, who was sitting at the table with her yellow star keychain sitting next to her plate. Olivia walked into the small apartment. She looked at the old blueprints on the wall. She saw the soul of a family that lived with love, but struggled with every bill. She turned back to Daniel. "Daniel, I looked into your service records this morning," Olivia said. "You weren't just a technician in the military. You were a chief systems engineer with high-level clearance. You received a commendation for valor for keeping a communications hub running during an ambush. Why are you working as a janitorial technician?" Daniel looked down at his coffee. I did my job, Olivia. But when I got home, Emma was only 5. My wife was very sick. I couldn't take a high-stress corporate job that would keep me away from home 14 hours a day. I needed something simple so I could be a dad when she needed me most. Olivia nodded. She finally understood. She reached into her bag and pulled out a formal contract. I'm not here to offer you a handout, Daniel, she said. I'm here to offer you a partnership. I want you to be the head technical consultant for Carter Industries. You'll oversee the physical infrastructure of our entire global grid. You'll be the one who makes sure the world stays connected. Daniel started to protest, but Olivia raised a hand. Wait, before you say no, the job is flexible. You work from the headquarters 3 days a week. The rest you can do from home. You'll have a full salary, a bonus, and most importantly, you'll never have to take a night shift again. Daniel looked at Emma. She was watching them, her eyes wide. She knew her father was a superhero, but she didn't know the rest of the world was finally finding out. Daddy, Emma whispered, does this mean you can come to my school play on Thursday? Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Olivia. She wasn't just fixing his career, she was fixing his life. She was giving him back the time he had sacrificed for years. Yes, Emma, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll be there. I'll be at every single play from now on. He turned back to Olivia and took the pen. I'll take the job. Thank you, Olivia. Don't thank me, Daniel, she said, touching the small yellow star on his key ring. Thank the girl who taught you that doing the right thing matters. If you hadn't returned that wallet, I would have lost my mother's photo. And I would have never found the man who could save my company. Years later, Daniel Hayes would become one of the most respected names in the tech industry. He and Olivia would build a partnership that revolutionized the world, and every year they would host a gala for single parents. Daniel never forgot where he came from. He still carried the heavy ring of keys, and he still carried the little yellow star. It was a reminder that in a world of billionaires and skyscrapers, the most powerful thing you can ever own is your integrity. Because a small act of kindness doesn't just change a night. It changes a life. It changes a legacy. Emma was right all along. Her dad really could fix everything. He fixed the machines, he fixed the company, and finally, he fixed their future. If you believe doing the right thing can change lives, subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories for more powerful stories about everyday heroes.